How's it going, everyone? So this is part 2 of my 4-part series guide on Monster Hunter World / Iceborne. Now in this one I'm going to be covering how to solo any hunt, and I'm going to be using a specific monster. In fact, this is the one monster if you complain about online that you're not going to be berated for not being good enough. It's the barioth. Now even though this is a Iceborne monster, everything that I'm going to be showing you will be applicable to hunts in the core game. But before I get into the video itself, let me just ask that if you want to help out a small YouTuber, then go ahead and hit the like button, as well as consider subscribing and hitting the notification. But with all that out of the way, let's get into the video, shall we? So before we begin, let me go ahead and tell you that I have timestamps down below so you can just skip to the part that you really want to get to. Also, as a disclaimer, because I've been using higher resolution for recording, I've been having to test around a bunch of different settings just to make my footage usable. And because of that, I don't really have that great a selection of hunts to choose from to add to this video. But hopefully what I did get would be enough to actually illustrate the points that I tried to make. But with that, let's go ahead and talk about the pre-hunt setups. Let's start now with what probably 90% of hunters don't even deal with, but really should, because it gives you a bunch of benefits if you know what you're doing. And that is, of course, choosing your custom platter. Now, this isn't something that I admittedly don't use a lot of times, but if it's a particularly difficult hunt or just annoying, then yeah, I'm going to use it. And it's a really simple system. Mostly of what you have to keep in mind is what buffs you want and what food skills you want, and that's going to choose your ingredients for you. Now, you're really looking to get the most fresh ingredients that you can, because that's going to up the amount of health that you get, as well as the activation rate for your food skills. Now, I could go into this much more. I mean, I can make an entire 10-minute long video just on this, but to keep things simple and to keep it moving, for this hunt, we're really going to be going for a feline moxie food skill with the highest defense buff that we can get. So we're not going to get much of any health or activation rate. So yeah, we're just going to have to deal with that with a max potion. But speaking of a max potion, that brings us to our inventory setup and how to use it. And this is going to be highly dependent on whether or not you have the core game or Iceborne, and you've actually made it to the expansion pack, because once you get to the expansion, you get access to the Steamworks, and that's just going to give you a plethora of extra materials and ingredients to do what is going to be the best way to set up your inventory, which is essentially take the ingredients for the max potions and the different traps, and you can just keep spamming them instead of bringing mega potions. And just in case you don't know already, you will have to bind these to the radial wheel for it to work, since they'll only make the recipe that you want to if you select it from there. This now brings us to the Hunter and Palico tools, which is pretty situational for your Hunter, as well as it also comes down to personal taste and what you like. But for your Palico, you really do kind of want to go with the Trapper toolset or the Plunder Blade whenever you go solo. Now let's move on to something a little bit more fun as well as important, and that's going to be how to actually solo the fight itself. We're going to start with finding safe zones. This is what I actually think is the most important part of this video, because if you know where to stand, you can do this and this. Okay, that first one was actually purely by luck, but it still illustrates the power of knowing where the hitboxes can't reach you. Okay, so how do we find these safe zones? Well, let's look at barioth's, because his is a little tricky. It's right in front of him. Now, normally, you would think that right behind him would be the best because of just how many times he just goes after you and how aggressive he is. But in truth, he can't hit you. And that's how you essentially find any safe zone, because every single monster that's designed in this game has some sort of place around the monster that it can't get to you while it's attacking, unless if it's some sort of special attack. But there's also other times that they're not available. Now, with barioth, it's mostly available. But let's say a really good example will be Electrion, of after he does his big thunder attack that basically just keeps propagating outward, you're really supposed to roll in because you have a safe zone to his head where he lowers it, where you can break the horns. Now, just as there are safe zones, there's also the exact opposite, which I call danger zones, but I mean, there's not really any other name you can give them. But these are spots that you don't want to be in because they're almost impossible to dodge out of or get out of the way in time. But the real question here is, what's the best way that you can learn where these safe zones are? And the best thing that I can come up with, or that I've came up with for myself, is go into a quest or a hunt with the intent of just trying to figure out the movesets of the monster. Because it takes off the pressure of you actually trying to beat the monster and just learn what it is going to do. That's the best that I've gotten for myself. Next up is dodging, and some of this might have actually seemed pretty obvious, but just in case some people haven't noticed it yet, there are really two things you should keep in mind when choosing which way you're going to dodge. You can either dodge into a attack or away from it, and how to choose either one of them is whether or not the actual active hitbox is going to be too big to dodge through or not. So things like small limbs, you can very well dodge through them, but things that might leave behind a damage field or an entire body attack is not going to be dodgeable, and you need to roll away to make sure you still get your invulnerability frames. Also, one interesting note is that you can dodge through roars. You usually have to watch the foot whenever it connects with the ground is usually the time that you want to initiate your dodge. But yeah, hopefully that helped some. Let's get on to the actual fight itself. Okay, first off, you're going to have to realize that hunting solo is going to take you more time. So if you're not that patient, it might be best if you go on a Discord or some sort of social media group and try to find people to hunt with, or just go ahead and try randoms, which, depending on your temperament with that, it might be worth it just to go solo. The next thing to really keep in mind is that you're not going to be able to do a lot of damage in the beginning of the fight, because the monster is still going to be just all out attacking you, and you're going to have to be trading with it until you can wear it down and break parts and whatnot to actually be able to get in there and do damage. Because when you break the monster's parts, what happens is that it alters the active hitbox of the monster's attacks with those parts, as well as it can also cause behavioral changes in the monster itself. Like with barioth, whenever you break its wings, it will usually stumble and create an opening for you to get in there and attack it whenever it tries to maneuver around, or whenever it tries to lunge, which is what happened with that one clip I showed you while the hole with the safe zones. Now, with barioth, you should prioritize with breaking the wings, then the head. That's pretty well the strategy you should be going for, because it just makes the fight a lot easier. You should also be trying to wall slam the monster as well as mount it as much as possible. Now with mounting, you have to remember that consecutive mount, the monster becomes more and more resistant to mounting as the fight goes on. So there is going to be diminishing returns with that. And if you don't know exactly how to do a wall slam, basically grapple onto the monster's face and just use your clutch claw and fire it into a wall. Make sure you're pretty close to the wall, or otherwise the monster might just not hit it. And the final thing to consider is spam traps. This is really important because it's really underutilized, and because you can hold the ingredients to make traps in your inventory, in your pouch, you can just keep making more than just one, and it gives a really good opportunity to get in there and break apart. Also, make an effort to try to capture the monster, because this cuts down the amount of time that you're going to be in the quest itself. As well, it kind of cuts down on the risk of things going south at the very end. I mean, I don't know how many quests and hunts I failed because of this, but if you keep at it, the monster that you're trying to hunt solo is going to finally go down. And hopefully this video was able to show you or teach you something new that helped you get past any monster quest or anything that was giving you trouble. And if that is most definitely the case, then maybe consider subscribing and hitting the like button. But before I let you go, let me give some extra tips on different monster classes that might be a little bit helpful. And the two that will really be troublesome that the barioth fight won't cover is, of course, flying wyverns, as well as those that burrow. Now, with the flying one, Rathios is a really good example, so I'm going to use him. And a lot of times, the simple way to get him out of the sky is just to use a flash pod. But sometimes you might just want to let him hang in the air, because he has a really good safe spot if you stand right beside him. You can basically just attack the legs and the tail until you can get it cut off, in which case you really have less to hit. But that's the main thing that you have to keep in mind. Now, with burrowing monsters, you really should just use a screamer pod or just keep out of the way. And unfortunately, there isn't much more that you can really do about the situation in that case. But with using all these tips, you should be able to take on any monster solo without that much difficulty, as long as you have your armor and weapons up to snuff. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video as well as found it helpful, because this was a lot of work to put all of this into a short video. Well, short-ish, but still. But there's still 2 more guides left in this series, if you can call it that. But those are going to take some time because I have Monster Hunter Rise as well as Outriders that I want to do a review for, and some more content based around that as well. So some stacking of content and projects right there. And there's of course other games that I want to do reviews for, but those are going to be later down the road. But I just wanted to give you guys a heads up on what I'm planning on doing. And with that, I hope you guys have a good day, and I will see you in the next one.